Have you ever met someone whose small act of kindness completely changed another person's future? Sometimes, the greatest heroes don't wear expensive suits or own luxurious homes. Sometimes, they quietly sweep school hallways, unlock classroom doors before sunrise, and leave long after everyone else has gone home. This is the story of one forgotten school janitor and one frightened teenage girl who believed her dreams had ended forever. Neither of them knew that one decision, worth only $30, would change two lives forever. But the truth behind that day would remain hidden for 14 long years. And when it finally came out, no one at Maplewood High could hold back their tears. It was still dark outside when 63-year-old Walter Hayes unlocked the front gate of Maplewood High School. The old metal gate groaned like it always did. Walter smiled. Still louder than the students, he whispered. Every morning followed the same routine. He swept the entrance, collected litter left behind after football practice, checked every classroom, fixed broken chairs whenever teachers asked. Most students barely noticed him. To them, he was just the janitor. Invisible, easy to ignore. Some students didn't even know his name, but every teacher did, because Walter never complained. Not even after working at the same school for 28 years. His blue uniform had faded with time. His shoes were worn out. The sole on his right shoe had been glued back together 3 different times. Yet every morning, he smiled, because he believed something simple. A school should feel clean enough for every child to believe they matter. No one knew how difficult his own life had become. Walter lived alone in a tiny apartment. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 7 years earlier after a long illness. Nearly all of their savings had disappeared paying hospital bills. Since then, every dollar mattered. His paycheck covered rent, utilities, simple groceries, and the heart medication he quietly skipped whenever money became too tight. He never told anyone, because he hated pity. That Thursday morning felt ordinary, until he heard crying. Not loud crying, the kind someone desperately tries to hide. Walter followed the sound toward the old science hallway. Near the lockers, a young girl sat on the floor. She held a folded paper tightly against her chest. Her school backpack looked almost empty. Her shoes had tiny holes near the front. Walter recognized her. Emily Carter, one of the brightest students in the entire school. Always respectful, always studying, always helping classmates. Yet today, she looked completely broken. Walter slowly walked closer. Emily, she quickly wiped away her tears. I'm fine. Walter smiled gently. No one cries like that when they're fine. She looked down. It's nothing. Walter sat on the bench nearby. He didn't pressure her. He simply waited. Sometimes, silence helps people speak. Nearly a full minute passed. Finally, Emily unfolded the paper. My exam fee deadline is today. Walter looked at the notice. Final notice. Exam registration fee. $30. Payment required today. No payment. No final exams. No graduation eligibility. Walter quietly lowered the paper. You haven't paid? Emily shook her head. My mom lost her second job. My little brother's been sick. We can barely buy groceries. She forced a smile. It's okay. I'll work next year. Maybe finish school later. Walter's heart sank. He knew exactly what those words meant. Most students who left school because of money never came back. He stared at the floor. Only $30. Such a tiny amount. Yet today, it stood between this girl and her entire future. Walter quietly folded the notice and handed it back to Emily. For a long moment, he said nothing. His eyes drifted toward the old clock hanging above the hallway. 8:17 a.m. The office would stop accepting exam payments at noon. Only a few hours remained. Emily stood up and forced a weak smile. Thank you for listening, Mr. Hayes. She adjusted her backpack and slowly walked away. Walter watched until she disappeared around the corner. Something inside him refused to let the moment end. He reached into his pocket. One worn leather wallet. Inside, a $20 bill. A $10 bill. 2 $1 bills. Exactly $32. That was everything he had until payday. His prescription heart medicine cost $28. He had already delayed buying it for 3 days. His doctor had warned him, don't skip another dose. Walter closed his wallet. I'll think of something, he whispered. The first school bell rang. Students flooded the hallways. Laughter echoed through the building. Backpacks slammed into lockers. Teachers greeted their classes. Life moved on, as if nothing important was happening. But Walter couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Every time he swept the hallway, He remembered the tears in her eyes. Every classroom he cleaned. He imagined one empty desk next year. He had seen it before. Good students disappearing because life became too hard. Most people forgot them within weeks. Walter never did. Around 10:30 a.m., he entered the teacher's lounge to replace a broken trash bag. Two teachers were talking quietly. Emily Carter is one of the smartest students we've ever had. I know. It's heartbreaking. I heard she can't pay her exam fee. One teacher sighed. If she misses graduation, she'll probably never return. Walter froze. Neither teacher noticed him. He quietly finished changing the trash bag and walked out. His decision was becoming harder and clearer. At 11:15 a.m., Walter sat alone outside behind the maintenance shed. He opened the small lunch box his late wife had given him years ago. Inside, just a peanut butter sandwich. Before taking a bite, he noticed something tucked beneath the lid. An old photograph. It had been there for years. Margaret, smiling, holding his hand. On the back of the picture, written in faded blue ink, were words she had written shortly before she passed away. Kindness is never an expense. It's an investment you may never live long enough to see. Walter read the sentence twice, then 3 times. A tear rolled down his cheek. He looked toward the school building, then back at the photo. I still miss you every day, he whispered. The lunch suddenly didn't matter anymore. 11:42 a.m. Walter stood outside the school office. His hand rested on his wallet. His heart pounded. He knew exactly what would happen if he spent the money. No medicine. No extra food. Another difficult week. The secretary looked up. Good morning, Walter. He smiled nervously. I'd like to pay a student's exam fee. She blinked. Which student? Walter hesitated, then quietly answered. Emily Carter. The secretary searched the computer. That'll be $30. Walter slowly removed the last bills from his wallet. His hands trembled. When the money touched the counter, his wallet became almost empty. The secretary printed a receipt. Would you like me to tell her who paid? Walter immediately shook his head. No, please don't. Just tell her. Her exam fee has been taken care of. Nothing more. 5 minutes later, Emily was called to the office. Walter watched from the hallway, hidden behind a corner. She stepped inside, confused. A minute later, she came out holding the receipt. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked around the hallway, searching, looking for the person who had saved her future. But no one was there. Walter had already walked away, quietly pushing his old cleaning cart down the hallway, as if nothing had happened. No applause, no recognition, no thank you, just silence. Because that was enough for him. That evening, Walter stopped outside the pharmacy. He looked through the window at his heart medication. Then he checked his wallet. Only $2 remained. He smiled sadly and walked away. He told himself, I can wait one more week. But destiny. A week passed. Then another. Life at Maplewood High returned to normal. Students prepared for their final exams. Teachers rushed to finish lessons. The hallways buzzed with excitement. And Emily, she never stopped wondering who had paid her exam fee. Every day she asked the office secretary the same question. Please, can you tell me who helped me? The secretary smiled politely. I'm sorry, Emily. They wanted to remain anonymous. Emily thanked her anyway. But in her heart, she made herself one promise. One day, I'll find them. Months later, graduation day arrived. Parents filled the auditorium. Cameras flashed. Students laughed and hugged each other. Emily graduated at the top of her class. When her name was announced, the audience stood and applauded. But while everyone celebrated, Walter quietly stood near the back door, making sure every guest had a seat. No one noticed him, except Emily. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Walter simply smiled and gave a small nod. Emily smiled back. She had no idea. The man standing alone in the corner had changed her entire future. Years passed. Life moved quickly. Emily earned a scholarship to one of the country's best universities. The first year was difficult. She worked evenings at a small cafe, studied until 2 in the morning, skipped parties, skipped vacations. Every time she wanted to quit, she remembered one thing. Someone she had never met, had believed in her. That thought kept her moving forward. For years later, Emily graduated from law school with honors. Then came another surprise. A prestigious law firm offered her a position. Within a few years, she became one of the youngest partners in the company. Her success story spread across the city. Newspapers called her the girl who refused to give up. People praised her determination, but nobody knew. Her journey had begun with a mysterious $30. One rainy evening, Emily visited her mother. They were cleaning old family boxes stored in the attic. Dust covered everything. Inside one worn cardboard box, Emily found her graduation papers from high school, certificates, old notebooks, and the original exam fee receipt. She smiled. I still wonder who paid this. Her mother looked at the paper, then quietly said, I remember something. Emily looked up. What? The school secretary once told me. The person who paid refused to leave their name. But she accidentally mentioned one thing. Emily's heart raced. What did she say? Her mother closed her eyes, trying to remember. She said, the person's hands smelled like cleaning supplies. Emily froze. Cleaning supplies. Her mind raced through every face she remembered from school. Teachers? No. Office staff? No. Then, one gentle smile appeared in her memory. An old man, pushing a cleaning cart through the hallway. Mr. Hayes. No. She whispered. It couldn't be. Could it? The very next morning, Emily drove to Maplewood High. 14 years had passed. The building looked older. The paint had faded. Some classrooms had been renovated. Others looked exactly the same. She walked into the front office. A different secretary greeted her. Can I help you? Emily smiled nervously. I'm looking for Walter Hayes. The secretary's smile slowly disappeared. You know Walter? Emily nodded. I think. I owe him my life. The secretary looked down for a moment, then quietly replied. He's still here. But things haven't been easy for him lately. Emily felt her heart sink. What happened? The secretary looked toward the maintenance hallway. He almost retired last year, but he couldn't afford to. Emily stood frozen. The man who had saved her future was still working, at nearly 77 years old, and she had no idea. 14 years. 5,110 days. That was how long it had been since Walter Hayes quietly placed $30 on the school office counter. And now, without even knowing it, the person whose future he had saved was walking toward him. Emily slowly stepped into the maintenance hallway. The familiar smell of floor polish and fresh paint instantly brought back old memories. At the end of the corridor, she saw an old cleaning cart, a faded blue bucket, a worn-out mop, and beside it, an elderly man, carefully fixing a loose classroom desk. His hair had turned completely white. His shoulders were slightly bent. His movements were slower than she remembered, but the gentle smile, it was exactly the same. Walter looked up. Good afternoon. Emily felt her throat tighten. Mr. Hayes. Walter adjusted his glasses. For a few seconds, he searched her face. Then he smiled politely. I'm sorry. My memory isn't what it used to be. Have we met before? Emily couldn't answer. She simply nodded. I was your student. Walter's face brightened. Oh, it's always wonderful when former students come back. So, what are you doing these days? Emily smiled through tears. I'm a lawyer. Walter's eyes lit up. That's wonderful. I always loved hearing success stories. He reached out and gently shook her hand. I'm proud of you. Those 4 simple words hit Emily harder than she expected. He had no idea. He was the reason she had become successful. As they walked through the hallway together, Walter pointed toward different classrooms. They renovated this science lab. They built a new library. The old gym roof finally stopped leaking. He laughed softly. I guess some things do improve with time. Emily noticed something. Every few steps, Walter paused. He quietly placed a hand against his chest, then continued walking. Mr. Hayes, are you okay? Walter smiled. Just getting old. Nothing to worry about. But Emily wasn't convinced. A teacher passed by. Walter, don't forget your doctor's appointment tomorrow. Walter quickly interrupted. I know. The teacher smiled awkwardly and continued walking. Emily looked at Walter. You've been seeing a doctor? Walter shrugged. Oh, just routine checkups. It's nothing. He changed the subject immediately. So, are your parents doing well? Emily answered his questions. But inside, something felt wrong. Walter looked tired. Much more tired than any 77-year-old should. As they reached the school courtyard, Emily noticed the bench where she had once cried over her unpaid exam fee. She stopped walking. Mr. Hayes, do you remember a girl who almost couldn't take her final exams? Walter looked at the bench. His expression changed for just a second. Then he smiled gently. There were many students who faced difficult times. Emily took a deep breath. Someone secretly paid her exam fee. Walter looked away. I'm glad someone helped. Emily stepped closer. It was you, wasn't it? Walter stayed silent. The wind rustled the trees above them. Finally, he chuckled softly. I think you're giving an old janitor too much credit. Emily pulled the faded exam receipt from her purse. I've kept this for 14 years. I never stopped looking. The secretary told my mother the person smelled like cleaning supplies. Walter lowered his eyes. Still, he said nothing. Then Emily whispered, You gave up something important for me. Walter smiled sadly. Sometimes, the future of a child is worth more than $30. Emily's tears spilled over. So it was you. Walter sighed. I promised the office I wouldn't tell anyone. I never wanted you to feel like you owed me anything. You earned your success. I only opened a door. Emily shook her head. No, you gave me a future. Before she could say another word, Walter suddenly grabbed the edge of the bench. His face turned pale. The color drained from his lips. Mr. Hayes. He forced a weak smile. I'm all right. But the sentence never finished. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the ground. Teachers rushed from nearby classrooms. Someone shouted, Call an ambulance. Emily dropped to her knees beside him, holding his hand. Walter looked at her with fading eyes, then whispered something so quietly. Only she could hear it. Don't waste your second chance. The ambulance sirens echoed through the school grounds, and Emily realized the man who had saved her life was now fighting for his own. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Its siren echoed through the streets. Emily sat beside Walter, holding his trembling hand. For the first time in 14 years, she was terrified of losing the man she had spent so long trying to find. At Maplewood General Hospital, doctors rushed Walter into the emergency room. The doors closed. Emily was left standing alone in the hallway. Every second felt like an hour. She couldn't stop thinking about one question. How had a man who spent his whole life helping others ended up here, alone? Nearly an hour later, a doctor stepped out. Are you family? He asked. Emily hesitated. No, but he's family to me. The doctor gave a gentle nod. Mr. Hayes is stable. Emily let out a long breath she didn't realize she had been holding. But, the doctor continued, his condition is more serious than he admits. Emily's heart sank. What do you mean? The doctor lowered his voice. His heart condition has been getting worse for years. He has repeatedly delayed treatment. And according to his records, he hasn't been taking his medication regularly. Emily whispered, Why? The doctor sighed. From what we can tell, he simply couldn't afford it. Emily felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. She remembered that day. The $30. The empty wallet. The pharmacy across the street. A terrible thought entered her mind. Had he chosen her future over his own health? Tears filled her eyes. Oh, Mr. Hayes. A nurse approached carrying a small paper bag. These were his personal belongings. Emily looked inside. A faded wallet. A pair of old glasses. A keyring with only 2 keys. And a worn photograph. She carefully turned it over. It showed Walter standing beside a smiling woman. On the back, in faded blue ink, were the words, If you can change one child's future, you've lived a meaningful life. Emily pressed the photograph against her chest and cried. Later that evening, Walter finally opened his eyes. The hospital room was quiet. Emily was sitting beside the bed. She had never left. Walter smiled weakly. You should be home. Emily shook her head. I'm exactly where I need to be. He chuckled softly. You always were stubborn. Emily smiled through her tears. Mr. Hayes, I need you to answer one question honestly. He looked at her. Did you skip your medicine because you paid my exam fee? Walter was silent. For several moments. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the room. Finally, he answered. Not just because of that. Sometimes there were other bills. Sometimes someone else needed help. Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Someone else? Walter nodded. There was a boy who needed winter boots. A teacher whose house burned down. A cafeteria worker whose husband got sick. I just did what I could. Emily stared at him in disbelief. You never told anyone? Walter smiled. If people know you're helping, they sometimes thank you. I was never looking for thanks. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the hospital window, looking out at the city lights. The more she thought about Walter's life, the more one painful truth became clear. The world had celebrated her success, given her awards, invited her to speak at conferences. But the man who made that success possible was still living alone in a tiny apartment, counting every dollar. That wasn't right. And she decided it was time to change that. The next morning, before Walter woke up, Emily quietly stepped out of the hospital. She made 3 phone calls. The first was to her law firm's senior partners. The second was to the chairman of the Maplewood School Board. The third would surprise the entire town. By sunset, news crews would be gathering outside Maplewood High School, and Walter Hayes still had no idea that the greatest surprise of his life was only one day away. The next morning, Walter was feeling much better. The doctor smiled. "Your condition is stable. But from now on, no more skipping medication." Walter laughed softly. "I'll try." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "You'd better do more than try." Walter nodded. Deep inside, he wondered how he would ever afford it. Meanwhile, Emily's plan was already in motion. News spread across Maplewood in just a few hours. A special ceremony had been announced at Maplewood High School. Teachers received invitations. Former students were called. Local reporters arrived with cameras. No one knew why. Only Emily did. That afternoon, Walter was discharged from the hospital. As he stepped outside, he was surprised to find a black SUV waiting for him. Emily opened the door. "Come with me." Walter smiled. "Where are we going?" Emily grinned. "You've spent your whole life surprising other people. It's finally your turn." When they arrived at Maplewood High, Walter froze. The parking lot was full. Students lined both sides of the entrance. Teachers stood in neat rows. Former graduates had traveled from across the country. Television cameras pointed toward the front gate. A large banner hung above the entrance. "Thank you, Mr. Walter Hayes." Walter whispered, "What is all this?" Emily simply smiled. "It's long overdue." As Walter walked through the entrance, something unbelievable happened. One by one, students began applauding. Then teachers. Then parents. Within seconds, the entire crowd was on its feet. The applause echoed across the campus. Walter looked around in disbelief. "No, you don't have to." But no one stopped. Some people were smiling. Others were crying. For the first time in nearly 30 years, the man everyone had overlooked was finally being seen. Emily stepped onto the stage. She took a deep breath, then looked at the crowd. "When I was 17, I thought my dreams were over. I couldn't afford my $30 exam fee. I believed I would leave school forever." The audience became silent. Emily continued. "Someone secretly paid that fee. They never told me. They never asked for recognition. They simply believed one struggling student deserved a chance." She turned toward Walter. "And today, I finally get to say thank you." The crowd erupted into applause again. Walter lowered his head, wiping away tears. Emily held up the faded exam receipt she had carried for 14 years. "I kept this because I promised myself, if I ever found the person who saved my future, I would spend the rest of my life honoring their kindness." She walked toward Walter. Then, in front of everyone, she hugged him tightly. The crowd fell silent. Many teachers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Emily stepped back and smiled. But that's not all. She pointed toward the school building. Workers rolled out a large covered sign. Walter looked confused. Emily nodded. "Go ahead." The curtain dropped. The new bronze plaque read, "Walter Hayes Student Opportunity Scholarship, helping students who cannot afford their education. Funded forever." Walter stared at the words. His lips trembled. "No." Emily smiled. "Yes. No student at this school will ever miss an exam because they can't afford it." The audience burst into applause. Emily wasn't finished. She reached into her bag, then handed Walter a small envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was the deed to a cozy little house, fully paid for. Walter looked up, speechless. Emily smiled through tears. "You spent your life making sure others had a future. Now it's our turn to take care of yours." Walter tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply whispered, "This is too much." Emily gently shook her head. "No, it's still not enough." The crowd remained silent. Many people were still wiping tears from their eyes. Walter looked at the deed to the little house in his hands. His fingers trembled. He slowly looked up at Emily. "You've already done more than I ever imagined." Emily smiled. "No, Mr. Hayes. I've only returned a tiny part of what you gave me." Walter shook his head gently. "You still don't understand." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Walter folded the deed carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then he reached into the pocket of his old blue janitor's jacket. From inside, He pulled out a small, worn notebook. Its edges were faded. The cover was cracked from years of use. "I've carried this for almost 30 years, he said quietly. Emily looked at the notebook. "What is it?" Walter smiled. "Every time I helped someone, I wrote down only one thing. Not their names. Just the date and what happened." Emily slowly opened the notebook. The first page read, "A boy needed winter boots." The next page, "A single mother couldn't buy school supplies." Another page, "A teacher lost everything in a house fire." Another, "A cafeteria worker needed help with hospital bills." Then, one page made Emily stop breathing. May 18th. "A girl almost lost her future because she couldn't pay her $30 exam fee." Beneath it, only 6 words. "I believe she'll change the world." Emily covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "You believed in me before I believed in myself." Walter smiled. "Sometimes that's all a child needs." Emily turned another page. The last page was blank. "Why is this one empty?" she asked. Walter looked across the crowd, then smiled. "Because I was waiting for one last story." Emily looked confused. Walter gently closed the notebook. "Today, the story isn't about the people I helped. It's about what happens when kindness comes home." The audience fell completely silent. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. Emily walked to the microphone. She took a deep breath. "When I came here today, I wanted to thank one man. But I realized something. Kindness should never end with one person." She turned toward the audience. "So today, I'm donating $2 million to create the Walter Hayes Foundation." The crowd gasped. "The foundation will help students across the country pay for education, books, food, and emergency expenses. And every year, thousands of children will get the same second chance that I received." Thunderous applause erupted. Some students were openly crying. Teachers hugged one another. Walter stood frozen. He had never imagined that a simple $30 would grow into something that could change thousands of lives. A young student slowly walked onto the stage. She looked nervous. She handed Walter a handwritten letter. He unfolded it. It read, "One day, I hope someone tells a story about me the way people tell yours. Thank you for proving that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." Walter couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He hugged the little girl tightly. As the sun began to set over Maplewood High, Walter stood in front of the school one last time. He looked at the hallways he had cleaned for nearly 3 decades. The classrooms, the playground, the old front gate. Emily stood beside him. "What are you thinking?" Walter smiled. "I'm thinking. I spent years believing no one noticed an old janitor." He looked at the students laughing in the courtyard. "I was wrong," Emily gently replied. "No, Mr. Hayes. They noticed. They just needed someone to tell your story." Walter nodded. For the first time in many years, his heart felt lighter. Not because he had received a house, not because people applauded him, but because he knew one simple truth. Kindness never disappears. Sometimes, it takes years to come back. But when it does, it changes far more lives than we ever imagine. If this story touched your heart, remember this. You don't have to be rich to change someone's future. Sometimes, a small act of kindness, a meal, a few dollars, or simply believing in someone, can become the beginning of a miracle. Because the greatest investments are never measured by money. They're measured by the lives they change.